where the market is headed this morning.
The lines of credit.
Higher priced mortgages worldwide are
the markets and policymakers.
wrapped up his testimony before
A study just out from Stanford Law School and Cornerstone Research shows securities fraud class action lawsuits rose 19% in 2008. That is the highest level since 2004. Now, we're all over this story this morning with study co-author John Gould, Vice President at Cornerstone Research. He joins us in Boston. Also with us right here in New York, Thomas Stubbs. He's Senior Partner at Labaton Sucharow. His firm represents investors in class action lawsuits. So, John, I want to start with you. Let's talk about your research. What were some of the main reasons that there was a spike in securities fraud class action lawsuits?
Thanks. Yeah, I think some of the main reasons, one that really jumps out is subprime. You know, we had 210 filings, as you said, up 19% from the year before, and approximately half of them were related to the subprime crisis. And even when you get further and look into the financial sector, and we look at the financial companies within the S&P 500, a third of them were sued last year, and that represents over 50% of the market cap of those companies. So an interesting question for those, of course, is, you know, are there any companies left to sue?
Are there?
Well, there certainly are a lot. When we look within the, when we look within the S&P 500, you do get a third were sued, but certainly there's many financial companies that are much smaller. And, an interesting fact was 9 out of the 10 top companies with it as measured by market cap were sued last year. So I think there are some left, but certainly a lot of the big ones already have been sued.
All right, is this expected to continue? I mean, this level of litigation intensity, if you will, within the financial services expected to continue in your view?
In my view, it's hard to say. I think a lot of the companies have already been sued. I'm not sure we're going to see many new suits coming next year. I'm sure we will see some, but it could be some of the suits that have already been filed will have amendments to their complaints that add additional allegations.
John, are these numbers surprising or not so, considering the environment we've seen in the last year and what we've seen in terms of investors?
I would say the one surprising thing to me was that the numbers weren't even higher in the second half of the year. Usually we see a relation between market volatility and the number of filings. The second half of the year, as we all know, volatility really went through the roof within the market, yet filings were pretty much even in the second half of the year than the first half. So that's a little bit of surprise that the numbers weren't even higher.
Why do you think that didn't happen?
A couple of reasons. Probably the main one is that we had so many just market-wide swings that it's hard to take an individual company and say, here's the reason your company went down even beyond the market. So companies dropped, but a lot of that was just market reasons. I'm
curious how much specificity you can give us in terms of the lawsuits. I mean, how large are these claims? Who's being targeted? What types of firms and so on?
How large are the claims? It's hard. We don't know what plaintiffs are going to ask for, but one measure we use is what we call the disclosure dollar loss, and that's simply at the end of the class period when the fraud is allegedly revealed, you look at the market cap drop of the company. Now, we had, I think it was around $225 billion in disclosure dollar loss last year. To put that in context, I consider 2000 and 2001 really the heyday of class actions. During that time, we had, the internet company, communication companies.
Right.
The numbers this year certainly rival those numbers.
All right, we've got about a minute before we have to take a break, but I want to bring in Tom Stubbs. I mean, Tom, you represent investors in class action lawsuits. You've heard some of these numbers that were just laid out by John. I mean, what are you seeing? Are a lot of investors coming to you filing lawsuits?
Well, there's been a lot of lawsuits, and indeed, John is right that it's surprising in some sense that there weren't more lawsuits flowing from the credit crisis crunch that we've experienced. What the Cornerstone data shows, if you scratch the surface, is somewhat interesting in that you find declining levels of lawsuits in most sectors, but an increase in the financial sector where the credit crisis really hit. But if you look at the number last year and you look at their 10-year trend, it is only up 9%. What that suggests is a couple things. Number one, as to the sectors that are not involved in the credit crunch, crunch. Deterrence of the system seems to be working both by what we do and by SCACs. Secondly, where there is a problem in the financial sector, the private bar has jumped in.
Tom, hang on a second because we've got to take a break, but I want to get more on that, on those points. We are going to take a break, everybody. Talking with John Gold and Tom Dubs on investors' lawsuits. Taking a break. You're watching Morning Call. Back in 2. Want to get back to John Gold of Cornerstone Research and Tom Dubs of Leviton Social. We're talking about the big spike in investor lawsuits involving stock fraud over the last few years. And Tom, we were just talking about why maybe it wasn't a bigger number in terms of those lawsuits, especially in connection with some of those financial firms.
Well, I disagree. I don't think that it was a big spike, and indeed, given what happened, it's
no, that's what I'm saying. That it wasn't as big as that one might have expected.
It wasn't as big as it could have been.
Right.
You know, part of the reason for that is that I think that the system is working as to the non-financial sectors between civil litigation and SCACs, but where there was a problem, then the plaintiff's bar jumped on the problem, and that accounts for, as John indicated, most of the increase in suits. Now, another thing that's interesting about these new suits is that approximately 1 in 4 of those suits, according to the Cornerstone data, are brought under provisions of the securities laws that are usually reserved for public offerings. Now, that means 2 things. Number one, there's not an intent requirement, so these suits have more legs to begin with. They're already at first base. And secondly, it means that the gatekeepers of the system, the investment bankers and the auditors, are named in these cases. Unlike a lot of the cases from the prior time period that Cornerstone examined, where because of Supreme Court decisions, as a general proposition, the underwriters and the auditors are given a pass.
All right. So, Tom, let me ask you, do you think, though, that this is just the beginning? Again, you know, these numbers don't seem very, very high. Do you think there's going to be a lot more?
I think there's going to be more credit crunch litigation. I think that it is true that most of the obvious major players have already been brought in, but this is a work in progress. There's no question about it.
All right, certainly something we're going to closely watch. Got to leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Tom Dubs and John Gold joining us in Boston. All right, a big earnings surprise from Walmart, everybody. Details coming.